Hello and welcome to today's event looking at how social landlords can best deal with the impact of rising energy prices. Today's event, sponsored by Anenco, is about an issue that is currently impacting on the lives of everybody who will be tuning in today and individuals and families across the UK. And such as the scale of the crisis, it's headline news every day. I mean, here's a selection from the last 24 hours. Warning of fresh energy bill shock in October as prices rise again. Mum dressing baby in more and more clothes to keep warm as energy bills soar. And up to 1.5 million households will struggle to pay food and energy bills amid cost of living crisis. So, you know, that and you'll be seeing, everybody will be aware of headlines like that we're seeing in our press, you know, on a daily basis right now. And yeah, to be honest, we know the scale of the problem we're facing, and it's one that's likely to get worse. A research briefing published by the House of Commons Library just yesterday warned of forecast further increases of between 30 to 50% in October, and that report stated that it would cost the poorest 20% of households an additional 850 to 950 to use as much energy in 2022-23 as they did in 1920. So that, if you like, is the broad background to what we're talking about today. And today's webinar will focus specifically on how social landlords are looking to respond to this crisis and very specifically what it might mean for them in the ways they procure energy themselves. We want to look at the kind of forecast landlords themselves are making about future costs and ask how effective energy procurement strategies in the sector currently are. What steps are landlords taking to improve their energy efficiency, and what potential pitfalls should they be looking to avoid as they develop and update their strategies? So a number of questions and a number of things for us to work through today, and no doubt some really practical questions that will be coming in from all of you tuning in as well. To talk us through the implications of the energy price rises and to give us some insight into how best to proceed, we've got a fantastic panel lined up for you today. We'll be hearing from Sam Granger, Head of Environmental Sustainability at 13 Group, Dan Pardesi, Head of Social Housing at Anenco, Laura Summerall, Head of Procurement with Paradigm Housing Group, and Cecily Church, Sustainability Manager at Guinness Partnership. So yeah, great panel, a huge range of expertise to talk us through things today. Before we get there though, let's just find out a little bit about you in the room, and we've got just to help guide some of the talk and discussions. So we've got a poll that's just popped up, hopefully on your screens. To what extent are you concerned by the impact of rising energy costs on your organisation? So yeah, relatively straightforward question, but let's just get a bit of a feel for where everybody is in the room. So a range of options: to a large extent, to some extent, a limited extent, or to a very limited extent. So yeah, just pick the option that fits best with you. Give you another second or two just to guide us about how concerned people are in the room today. So yeah, let's move to the poll results. I think we can probably predict where it's going to go, but let's have a look. Yes, so yeah, to a large extent, by far the dominant answer there, 84.3%, and then to some extent next down the list, and virtually nobody to a limited or to a very limited extent. So everybody in the room concerned by the impact on their own organisation. So yeah, let's move to getting some answers. And before I introduce our first panelist, just a reminder, there's a Q&A box there, and please do make use of it. Obviously we've just heard what a concern it is to everybody here. Let's try and get the answers to some of the practical questions you've got, so you've got takeaways for your own organisation. So use that Q&A box, and I'll get through as many possible of your questions as I can following the presentations. So do use that Q&A box, and we'll get to them following the presentations. Right, that is plenty from me, and I will now hand over to Sam. So Sam, welcome, and the floor is yours.
My name's Sam Granger. I'm Head of Environmental Sustainability at 13 Group. So I'm going to talk to you today, first of all, about what we're doing at 13 to minimise the impact of the rise in energy prices within our business. So basically what we're trying to do is make sure that we've got a true understanding of what we're paying for, and actually what the increase in prices will mean for us. So we're in a much better place, I'm happy to say, on this journey than we were a few years ago. And I won't lie, it has not been a simple task. And anyone on the call who deals with energy will know it's not always easy to get a grip and understand where all of the energy costs are coming from. We started our journey back in 2018 as part of our ESOS return, which newly into my role at 13 as head of environmental, I thought I'll take on that task. That'll be simple, won't take too long. Boy, was I wrong. The complexity of understanding where the data was held, the meter readings, just the actual accuracy of the data. It was a really difficult task. So very quickly, we got a business case together and brought on board an energy manager, Claire, who I think is on the call today as well. And one of her first tasks was basically to get control of the data, understand where all our meters were, and understand what that baseline position was, so that we had a true understanding of what our actual, what our data was telling us and how much we were spending. Our actual budgets were split across multiples. We got it all pulled together, so we just had that one clear picture. That then helped us to procure the support that we needed to get a better deal and put our buying power behind all our energy, but also bring an expert on board to help Claire on that journey. Claire's now been working with an ENCO for just over 18 months, I think. And over that period, we've seen 11% reduction in our energy spend. Majority of that has been from getting refunds where we've been paying for energy that wasn't necessarily our responsibility, from getting better meter reading processes in place, removing the estimates, getting the rebates, and starting to roll smart meters out. We've also started to have much better management of our half-hour data. So by pulling them all under one provider, we're getting better data availability and also efficiency when it comes to costs. Now, we're aware that we may not get these efficiencies over the coming years as the prices increase, but what we are is in a much better position to be able to actually plan what the increase means for us. Because if we know our energy spend now is X and the actual accuracy of that is much higher than where we were, we can better forecast where we are and how we're going to be impacted over the coming years. In the future, we're obviously looking at how we want to make our use of energy more sustainable. More recently, well, literally just in the last couple of months, having net zero by 2035 has actually come. Someone is just ringing my doorbell. I cannot believe it midway presenting. Sorry, that's the joys, isn't it, of presenting from home. So it's a strategic priority for us to be net zero by 2035, and that's been signed off by our board. And we're looking to achieve this, obviously, on our energy as well. So we're continuing with the effective management of meter readings, etc. But also starting to look at how we can actually reduce waste, increase efficiency in the building where we're paying energy for. So that has included doing some energy audits of the biggest demanding buildings, so those that are within the top 10. Again, we've looked to an ENCO for that support. And then from there, we'll be able to inform our asset investment between now and 2035 to bring the energy use down in those properties. We're also looking at renewable where we can, where appropriate, and where we can on-site generation. So there's a picture there of our 13 recycling centre, which not only has PV on the roof, but we have battery storage in-house as well. So that means if we don't use the energy, we can store it for other days. And obviously just building in that future flexibility as to how we buy our energy, who we buy it from, and the type of tariffs that we're on, moving to renewables completely when we think it's appropriate to do so. So key lessons, upmost is to understand your energy use, know what you're responsible for, and take steps to review and strengthen your energy management. It's not an easy job, it's not simple, but it is certainly worth the investment, and the payback you get from being more effective will help you with these increasing energy rises. Procure the right support. having experts externally to support you on this has been really necessary for us. And develop a plan and track your outcomes. Know what your journey is going to be. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Lots of food for thought there, yeah, some key takeaways, and we've got a load of questions already starting to come in, which I think does show exactly how seriously people are taking this, and also that kind of desire to drive and improve performance. So yeah, do keep those questions coming in. I'm making a note of them. We'll get to as many of them as possible following the presentation. So thanks very much, Sam. Dan, welcome, and yeah, it's over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dan Pardesi, Head of Social Housing, and I generally support our customers in this sector to help manage their energy and sustainability needs. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the concerns that we're hearing from our customers in this area, concerns generally about rising prices. I'll talk a little bit about the market and why we have these concerns, actually how prices are made up and what the drivers are there. And I'll go into a little bit about the misconceptions that we sometimes come across in the sector specifically, and some of the challenges that people think they have, before I talk about what you can actually do and how you can actually deliver a good price for tenants in recharges. So to start with, some of the concerns that we hear. Actually, what are people saying? The markets are rising and they're incredibly volatile, and that's absolutely correct. We've had challenges with people not being able to get energy suppliers to tender because of that volatility. We're worried, organisations are worried about the double hit. In effect, tenants are experiencing rises in their own domestic energy costs on one side, and on the other side, social landlords are experiencing increases due to the market in the energy that then is recharged back to tenants for shared spaces. That's set in a background of rising prices and actually a cost of living crisis, which we're all experiencing. And so organisations are saying, we're trying to protect our tenants in some areas from these increases in price, but that can't continue forever. And at some point, all of that is going to land on the tenant who's already finding these cost increases challenging, and that's likely to mean for the association an increase in service charge debt. So it's going to be a challenge that we're going to experience for a while. So I think before we go into it in more detail, it's worth just understanding a little bit about how energy prices are actually made up. So from the, I'll just wait for this to build, but from the sort of historic basis, what we've seen has been that the commodity element, so the raw price of electricity on the commodities market for electricity has made up about 40%. There's been an element of cost which is from transportation and distribution, getting that power down the to your site. There's been an element of taxes and levies, and there's been a small amount that the supplier makes for bringing that all together and sending you a bill. On the gas side, it's been slightly lower on taxes and levies, which has meant that the commodities made up a bigger proportion. But what we've seen over the last 2 years is that commodity element has grown and grown and grown. And now it's by far and away the most important element of the bill to manage effectively so that you can manage your overall price. For electricity, that's more nowadays like 60% and gas closer to 80%. And that's because of the changes in the market. In the market, we've seen prices historically reasonably stable. Now looking back at them, we saw the prices fall when we all went into lockdown in March 2020. And since then, there's been a steady increase in price over the past 2 years, spiking in October 21, pre-Christmas, and with a significant spike at the start of the Ukraine crisis. So it's worth saying that actually there's lots of drivers in the market. It's not all just the current war and challenges that are occurring in Ukraine. Actually, it comes down to things like it comes down to things like gas storage levels, liquefied natural gas cargoes, which are floating around in boats going to different countries around the world. It comes down to things like carbon prices, as more and more people look to buy carbon allowances as they go on their road towards net zero. It comes down to temperature forecasts, and it comes down to literally planned maintenance or shutdowns at power stations around the UK and around Europe as well, because of our interconnectors that go across seas to other European countries. But with these prices, it's important to see that they're actually strategically traded in seasons ahead. And when we look at prices, actually, yes, prices are very expensive at the moment. When we look at the price charts in the market, prices get cheaper and cheaper the further out that you buy. So yes, we're absolutely in a price crisis with prices at least 4 times higher than the long-term average. But the better value that can be secured, both in electricity in the top chart and in gas in the chart at the bottom. So what are we hearing in the market? What are some of the challenges in people's thinking? We tend to hear that people will wait it out and wait for it to go back to normal. I'm afraid that's probably not going to happen. Our relationship with Russia is not going to go back to normal anytime soon. And I think that's sort of been reiterated today in the news with some of Boris Johnson's comments about long-term relationships with Russia and with President Putin. We have this. We typically have a challenge with people thinking that they can't contract for longer than 12 months because of Section 20. Actually, Section 20 is there to make sure that tenants receive best value. And there's conversations now ongoing with BEIS, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, discussing if it's actually achieving those objectives. Generally, it's not. And because of that, organisations can look to apply for dispensation to Section 20 to allow them to contract for longer times. Organisations often think, well, if we've got multiple suppliers to tender, then we've got a good price. But actually, when we're tendering for a fixed price, suppliers are all going to the market on the same day. They're all getting the same cost from the market. And because of that, the only difference between those costs is going to be in the supplier's margin, which makes up a disproportionately small amount of the overall bill. So again, it's important to think about when we tender rather than how many organisations we tender to, because the position in the commodity market has a far greater impact. We've always just signed up for 12 months. Again, this has usually historically been something to do with Section 20. Just because you've always done it doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do now. The market's in a far different position to where it has ever been. So it's important to think about a different strategy when we're in different times. So what can we do to manage the impact of rising costs? Actually, we should think about the strategy. We should take a longer term approach, perhaps, achieving things like Section 20, allowing you to Section 20 dispensation, allowing you to contract for longer, taking advantage of that better value that's out in the long term in the markets. Should challenge the status quo. As I say, just because you've always done something doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do now. So yes, the markets are very high, and nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows where the markets are going to be in 2 to 3 years, even longer than that. But ultimately, you should make a plan which gives you the protection to protect from rising costs, but also gives you the flexibility to benefit should markets fall. We need to be quick. Actually, as prices are rising, if we go through a long drawn-out tender process, then the markets will be higher by the time you finish that process. So we should think about speed and things like compliance, often using things like frameworks to appoint suppliers and appoint consultants are a helpful way of doing that. We can seek out advice from trusted experts, so people like Procurement Hub from a procurement and frameworks perspective are good to speak to. And you should speak to an energy consultant who you can trust to give you guidance around the markets. And also, we need to make sure this is integrated across the different elements. And Sam talked about everything that 13 Group have done, and that's been a really great example. Making sure that energy purchasing is integrated with budgeting, so you know what costs are going to be, is really important, as not just the commodity cost change, but also the tax landscape changes. And as we move to more and more renewables on the grid, the non-commodities change too. And we need to align all of this with different efficiency programs. So, what are you building? What more efficient equipment is going into that? What is your consumption likely to be in the future? How does this align with your net zero strategy? Do we need to purchase green energy? And so on. So it's really important to have a joined up strategy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dan, and lots to pick up on there, I think, and we've got a large number of questions coming through during that presentation too. So thank you all very much for sending them in, and a reminder that if you haven't yet, this is absolutely your opportunity to get the answers to the questions that you're kind of wrestling with at the minute, and hopefully some advice to take back to your own organisation. So do keep them coming in, and there's certainly plenty coming through, which we'll get to very shortly. So thanks very much for that, Dan, and look forward to hearing more from you shortly. Laura, welcome, the floor is yours. It's over to you.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Laura Summerell, Head of Procurement at Paradigm Housing. I'm going to talk to you about our journey within energy procurement. So we recognised in a few years ago that we wanted to explore getting even better value for our spend on energy. That started with investing in better analysis of our energy bills, making sure, for example, that we were always paying the right amount given the amount of energy we used. This area used to sit within our facilities team. However, in 2019, it moved to sit within the procurement function. Our approach now also includes a different procurement strategy for our energy. We now procure energy much further out, so we secure our prices in advance and can plan accordingly. At the moment, we are trading for energy up to a year ahead of when we're going to be using it. We have what's called a portfolio trading strategy. Our plan now is to move to securing prices over an even longer period of up to 5 years. As Dan talked about a moment ago, the benefits of doing that are really important to our business. Our energy procurement strategy means we've had to seek special dispensation on the Section 20 consultations, through which we consult with residents over major works. Normally the timelines for such consultations would mean it wasn't possible for us to procure energy so far in advance. When the energy is procured on behalf of our residents for the communal areas, for instance. Seeking this dispensation took some time, but we feel it's worth it to give the residents some stability on their service charge and the best possible value. We provide more. It will provide more. We provide more communication to our residents than was required to our customers to ensure that we have what they need so they can understand the complex approach. It's quite a difficult topic to explain to our residents, so making sure that they understood what we were doing is really important. We knew from the offset that energy procurement is hugely complex. Although we have learned a lot about it over the years, we're not subject matter experts, so we look to Inenco to provide that subject matter experts and that relationship for us. We don't think that we should have necessarily all the answers within our business, and I don't know as if anybody in the energy market has total and utter knowledge of energy. That's how complex that the market is. Although we've learned a lot, there is still lots to learn. the real benefits to better reporting. So we have the benefits of doing this are that there are real benefits to the reporting that we have from an ENCO. There's a potential to secure better prices by changing the procurement strategy. Energy procurement is very complicated and no one in the housing association can be expected to know it all, even the experts. What I would suggest is be prepared to ask questions of those subject matter experts, whether that's an ENCO or somebody else similar. They can help bolster your knowledge, your own knowledge and your business's knowledge. And just to know it's a journey, you don't need to know everything or do everything immediately, but you have to start somewhere. And I think now is a really important time to start. That's all from me. Thanks.
Fabulous. Thanks very much. And yeah, a number of points to pick up on there, and those questions are pinging in front of my eyes as I speak. So there's loads to get through. So lots of response to the presentation so far, and some really specific questions coming through, and a wide range as well. So we'll get to as many of them as possible very shortly, but do keep them coming in. Yeah, after the next presentation, we'll start to move through some of them. So yeah, thank you very much, Laura. And Cecily, welcome. And yeah, I will now hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Martin. Yes, so I'm Cecily. I'm the Sustainability Manager at the Guinness Partnership, and we're at very early stages in the next re-procurement of our energy. So I'm going to focus particularly on what we're doing around our office energy data, but particularly the energy saving and sustainability side of things to give a slightly different perspective. So we've started by, as others have, interrogating our office energy data and sustainability more broadly. We have set up a working group within the organisation to analyse our energy data and assess where there's potential for savings. And an interesting trend that we saw in the last year or so is that the energy consumption didn't decline as much as we might have expected over the pandemic period. We had an expectation that we would work from home more. From a sustainability perspective, we'd probably be saving energy overall because there wouldn't be the travel, and that the office energy use would decline, maybe home energy use would rise. That wasn't quite what we found, which is interesting, and I think shows that we've got potential for closer analysis and better management of our energy usage in offices. And so this working group is exploring that and feeding back into our ESG reporting requirements, our sustainable finance reporting, and then picking out those ways that we can save energy, save money, and reduce environmental impact. So we're looking at gas and electricity usage, also water usage, which is metered and then has the implications on the hot water energy usage side of things. And then tracking better, as has been said in previous presentations, our renewables and assessing opportunities to roll out more renewables. We've also put in electric charging points at a couple of our offices, and we are rolling out an electric fleet. So I think there's an interesting conversation to be had around the potential for savings, despite the signs that there's more usage of energy. So we might be using more electricity in our offices and have still the cost for our fleet, but there are those potential for savings because the electric vans in our fleet are extremely efficient, and for example in central London we're not hit by the emissions charges. We are starting to look at our energy re-procurement. It'll take place in October 2023. And because we've been in a fortunate position that we've had a long-term contract in place, we are expecting to have a significant increase then. So we're starting to plan early and investigate the opportunities for minimising risk and bringing that energy consumption down so that the hit isn't as great. And we're trying to ensure that from the outset that's a very engaged and collaborative process across teams at Guinness, because as has been touched on, there are the competing priorities around getting the best deal, but also ensuring that emissions are brought down, that we're potentially looking for green suppliers. And then there is that section of our energy procurement that is for our offices. There's also a huge amount for our communal areas and also our communal heating systems. So it does have big implications for our tenants as well as for us, which is something we're extremely mindful of. So just a few thoughts so far on our journey to date and how office and operations sustainability and energy reduction is going for us. So firstly, it's clearly a tumultuous time. We've got soaring energy costs, but then other competing priorities with climate change and the need to reduce emissions. We've had the pandemic and the huge implications that's had for changing our working practices and the extent to which we do go into the office. We've got more and more reporting requirements, particularly on the ESG side, and demand on from our investors on improving our environmental credentials as well as our social and governance impacts. But it's also a time when there is great sustainability innovation. And I think while it makes it quite an intimidating time and one where we'll need to act very quickly, it is a bit of a wake-up call for making real wholesale changes, that this isn't a time for tinkering around the edges. We will have to rethink potentially our entire office strategy, which is something we're starting to investigate. Maybe reconsidering our office footprint, thinking about how we use offices and how the energy is used within them, but then whether we can go through major changes to those offices that we do own or work with landlords where we don't, around increasing renewables. We have a question around battery storage, as has already been mentioned, how we do find that balance with an electric fleet and with charge points, and then whether we can upgrade heating systems to lower cost, more efficient systems. And I think all of these questions play into the second point, because offices and operations offer us this test bed in a way where we can try out the most innovative technology, and then also, I guess, the behaviour change side of it, getting our colleagues on board with saving energy, saving water, and finding out what works in terms of engaging people, in terms of having a measurable reduction in energy usage, and then seeing whether we can roll that out into our properties and for our customers and households as well on the behaviour change, but also say if we're able to do something more innovative in terms of renewables or perhaps communal heating systems, whether there are implications for that for our customers too. And I think finally there's a huge opportunity for learning. So we tried to make this internally something that we do quite collaboratively and share. Our original working group for the offices had a cross-section of teams from across the business. So it's not just facilities and procurement, it's also sustainability. And then as we go into the energy re-procurement considerations, our heat and hot water and our communal heating teams, so that we have the input on the emission reduction side and also this implication for tenant side. But I think it's broader than that as well. So I think this kind of a discussion and others with others in the sector are important for sharing best practice and learning from each other's. But there's, I think, much more that can be done from learning from other sectors as well. I think that ultimately on the office side, we're in a similar position to most other businesses that have large office footprints. And I think that if we can share best practice and learn from each other as much as possible, it's still going to be a very challenging time, but it puts us in the best position for managing difficult times ahead.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. And we've got a huge number of questions coming through to get through. So I will thank you to all of our presenters this morning. And we've covered a huge amount of ground already, I know. And we've got some questions that are coming through that are specifically relating to presentations, but also some kind of specific kind of individual organisation questions too. So yeah, I will move on to that now, and yeah, do keep those questions coming in, and I'll like I say, I'll try and get through as many as possible. Yeah, I might actually start with one that's just come in, but broadly speaking, there's a few themes emerging, I think, and there's some specific questions about different types of products, what types of products people should be looking at, prioritization in terms of work, data, definitely a number of questions coming in relating to some of the points that the presenters have been making about data usage and residents and interaction with residents as well. But let's start with one that has actually just come in from Ian, because it feels like quite a good kind of overarching question in terms of what perhaps relating to that issue about priorities that we that a number of people have mentioned in the questions. So Ian has asked, welcome Ian, do the presenters agree that it is money that is driving our energy reduction work and not climate change? Climate change seems to drive small and one-off projects. Energy prices are driving more strategic and organisation-wide improvements. Once energy prices do come down, sorry, will our commitments to reduce energy also reduce? So Cecily, I know we've spoken about this previously, so I might hurl this one straight back at you. So sorry not to give you a moment to have a swig of tea or whatever, but yeah, Cecily, that question right back at you.
No problem, thanks. Yeah, I think it's a good question, because I would see it historically as being driven by the financial side. And I guess that's been given a boost by the cost of living crisis. But I think that there's enough of a groundswell now around climate change and the need to reduce our emissions for that to really underpin it as well. And I think that whether or not costs come down, I think it will remain a priority. At Guinness, we've seen a huge increase in interest across the organisation, really, in sustainability, and at every level of the organisation. And we've got the mandatory requirements of getting to net zero carbon by 2050, and we're looking to set targets more ambitious than that. So I think that it will continue to drive it. We've put in place a new sustainability strategy and action plan, and this the energy in offices reduction side of it is a key part of it. And then it does align with ESG reporting requirements and the interest of investors in showing that we are taking sustainability seriously, that we are reducing energy. So in a way, the sustainability and climate change side has that financial element to it anyway, because if we can demonstrate that we are taking real concrete action against emissions, then we're putting ourselves in a better position for investment as well. So I think both will kind of go hand in hand, but I think it certainly is a significant factor.
And are there tensions there? Because you talked about kind of competing priorities. I'm just interested in how those kind of play out in your organisation. And Samantha and Laura, I'll come to you for insights from both of you in a couple of seconds.
Yes, I think that there will be, and it's early days. We'll see how it plays out in practice, because it's easier at the higher level to say, oh yes, we'll make sure everything aligns, and in practice, where there are cost implications for example, greener tariffs, it will have to be carefully thought through. But I think the sustainability awareness is increasingly there, and so long as we have the variety of voices in the room and the different teams involved, and that consideration, discussion being had around where we can afford to go down the greener route, and where it just makes financial and environmental sense to, and where it doesn't. I think that's the key thing, really. It won't be easy just to go straight to being entirely green and just slashing our emissions and our energy usage. But at least if we've got the right teams having the right conversations, then we can keep pushing this agenda and go as far as possible with that.
Thanks, Cecily, and yes, a really thorough answer. And I'm going to bring in Laura next, and then Samantha, because I'm just interested in whether you kind of get a different answer from perhaps a head of procurement to a head of sustainability. So, Laura, I'll bring you in first. That same question from Ian: do the presenters agree that it's money that's driving our energy reduction work, and not climate change? So, where's the balance for you? So, Laura.
I actually agree with Cecily. So from a procurement point, my main driver is cost, but that cost to the residents is my main thought, to making sure that we're supporting them and providing the best service to them. But equally, the business is driven definitely by the sustainability element, and what does that look like for our business, and not. We're obviously looking at retrofitting, but not putting a square peg in a round hole. So there's lots of technologies out there that we can make use of, but what would be the best for each property, and looking at the fabric first, and how we can best support. And I really feel that the underlying comment would be, this is for our residents around cost and their cost of living. And if it's beneficial to them, then we should be doing it.
Thanks very much, Laura. Interesting answer. And Sam, I'll bring you in at this stage to get that answer, and then I'll move on to some of the other questions that are coming through, specifically about data, and some specific questions based on some of the presentations. So, Sam, on that question, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with what's already been said. I think back in the early days, yes, it was the financial savings that helped me push the business case to work on our energy efficiency, but climate change is now one of our top priorities. We have 4 priorities in our strategic plan, and our promise to net zero and reducing environmental impacts is one of those 4. And I also agree that, by tackling it, looking at reducing energy need, we are then passing on savings for customers and ensuring that we're providing great services for customers and great homes for customers. 2 of our other priorities. So it goes hand in hand with being, a responsible landlord and a responsible business. And it's what our stakeholders are expecting of us. So I can't see it falling off the radar just because energy becomes cheaper in the future.
Thanks very much, Sam. Sorry, I was just searching for mute there. Thank you. Some really thorough answers to that question. Very, very much appreciated. I'm going to move on to a few more questions that have come through. And Dan, I'll bring you in at this stage, and do come in on that previous question if you want to add to it as well. A couple of specific questions for you based on the Section 20 dispensation issue that you were talking about, and a couple of people have come back on that. So I just touched on that for a few moments. A question from Ali: is a Section 20 dispensation time bound? And Maria, what did you have to provide for the dispensation to be authorised? And I guess what are then perhaps the ongoing kind of relationship management issues that might arise as a result? So, Dan, over to you.
Sure. Well, just to pick up on the last point as well, I think on Ian's question, one of the interesting points there is around, what do we do once energy costs come down? Actually, they have already come down from the peak. The peak was at the start of the Ukraine crisis, and prices now are about half of what they were at that point. Expecting prices to fall further in the long term is really crystal ball stuff, and is going to be really difficult to predict. So what I'd say there is that that I wouldn't predict prices to fall and that to affect the drivers for this. I think those drivers will remain to deliver a good price to tenants and residents, and to meet those climate targets, as Samantha mentioned there, things like net zero by 2035 for 13 Group. On Section 20, on those specific points, so is it time bound? Yes. So when you apply for Section 20 dispensation, you have to apply for a specific period. Typically, associations look at a period of 3, 4 or 5 years to make sure that they're giving best value to tenants. What information do you have to provide? This often differs depending on the organisation. So what I'd recommend is a conversation with your sort of risk and compliance teams that normally exist within organisations. But typically it's a summary of the reasons why, and that sort of summary of the rationale for your particular energy strategy, whether that's buying energy in advance or whether that's a particular flexibly traded type of energy procurement over a specific time. You can seek support on that rationale from your energy consultant, like an ENCO, and that's an area that we often provide help and support. A lot of the rest of the compliance work is typically done by in-house legal or indeed by your sort of normal solicitors that are used for this type of dispensation. Most associations have gone through dispensation programs in one form or another for various different projects. In terms of the last point there about ongoing sort of relationship management issues, I think Laura already mentioned this about ongoing communication with tenants and residents. I think what I've found over the last couple of years is that people just want to be informed. People want to know what's going on. At the moment, people understand that energy prices are rising. So as associations are communicating increases in service charges linked to rising energy costs, that's not been received horrendously badly as it might have otherwise been, because people have been prepared for that by what they've been seeing in the media and indeed the rises in their own bills. But what I'd say there is that, getting support to explain your strategy and to explain the outcome of your procurement strategy to your stakeholders, both internally and to your tenants and residents, is a really important part of that process, not just at the outset of your Section 20 dispensation, but actually on an ongoing basis, just to deliver good customer service to those tenants and residents.
Thanks very much, Dan. And I'm going to move on to, I think it's really detailed answer to those questions. I'm going to move on to, I guess, what some kind of product type questions that are coming through. What type of tech should we be using? That type of thing. Quite a few questions along those lines. So let's run through a few of them. A question. Actually, I won't name you just because you're talking about your own organisation. Environmentally, our company wants to go electric, but electric boilers and panel heaters are so expensive to run. I want to stay with gas, but need information to share about the costs to show this is a better option. And I guess this this is a kind of short term, long term, and so the question is, how do I do this, and am I right? This is somebody looking to challenge themselves as well. Where am I going to go? Sam, shall I pick on you? So yes, is this person right?
I think in the long term, no. I don't think sticking with gas is the right thing. I think I understand, yes, electric is more expensive at the moment compared to gas. However, with the right technology, the right approach to retrofitting the homes, you can save money. With electric, it just depends on the product. We use air source heat pumps in some of our homes. We've replaced night storage heaters with air source heat pumps and found customers are having a much better experience living in the home. They're saving money and they're healthier. One lady reported a COPD really improved within the first few months of having an air source heat pump, and she's saving money. So I think I understand the concern about replacing gas with electric heating. But again, it's looking at the fabric, it's looking at the actual asset itself and understanding if that's the right thing to do, and profiling that out over the asset plan over the coming years, I guess. The hope being that as we move towards 2030, 2035, that there is more of a balance in the cost.
Thanks very much, and Cecily, I'll bring you in on the same question. Is this person right? And I'll throw another one into the mix as we go along. Where should we go? Stuart's question is air or ground source heat pump. There's a number of questions that kind of along those lines about different types of tech. Cecily, and different types of approach. Cecily, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a hugely challenging one with the decarbonisation of electricity versus the cost gap with gas. It's very tricky, and I think when it comes to any property, it needs to be done on a case-by-case basis. It is still cheaper for gas, and not all properties are suitable for moving away to electric. I think, as Sam has said, there's the need to take a fabric first approach. That's what we're trying to do at Guinness, that we prioritise improvements to the fabric first, so that whatever heating system is in there, it's as efficient and the running costs and emissions are as low as possible. But if the heating system is being upgraded, I, from personal experience, have found that it can be worthwhile going to electric. We're generally trying to do it on any property that is not on mains gas at the moment, so that we can be fairly confident of an improvement and then learn lessons from it. And on the lessons learning point, I think it's about getting the right technology, but also making sure that it's done in the right way, so that it's suitable for the property, but also that the install process is done smoothly. So particularly for customers, that they get a good experience of when the measure is going in, so they're not biased against it from the outset, and that they're given the support and advice needed to make sure that they're confident in the technology and that it runs smoothly. We've done some research around the heat pumps that we've put in, and from what we found, they do work okay, or they work well, and they can save money versus off-gas alternative systems, and particularly storage heaters, but they do need to be run in a particular way. So having that well communicated is the crucial thing, really. And then it comes down to whether there's the budget and whether there's a drive for it. But there's, versus the fabric first approach, there is that opportunity to then build in renewables, and I think that's where it comes back to offices, that we can learn with offices in communal areas where we're putting on PV and maybe integrating with battery storage, or for blocks of flats potentially a sort of sharer system. We can try out these technologies and keep an eye on what the latest costs are for installing these measures, and therefore potentially roll them out to properties as well. With the question around air source versus ground source, it comes down a lot to cost. I guess, again, in an ideal world, we would increase the rollout of ground source. But it is something that potentially we have opportunities in communal areas, perhaps with offices, perhaps for blocks and new builds in particular, to trial the ground source side and maybe support the entire market in bringing the costs down. But often it is cost prohibitive, and air source is increasingly more and more efficient, performing ever better, and so for the most part, I think will be the technology that we'd lean towards.
Thanks very much, Cecily, and yeah, some really detailed answers to both of those questions. I'm going to throw one more into the mix for you, Laura, and so you can come back on any of those. But there's Cecily touched on there. AJ's asking, what about battery storage and agile tariff coupled with AI to buy energy at the cheapest cost available, with AI predicting the energy use for the building? Laura, I'll bring you in on that, and then we'll move on to a couple of questions about data a bit before wrapping up. So, Laura, over to you.
I'm not probably qualified enough to talk about AI and that sort of side of it, but we have recently discussed about battery storage and storing our energy, especially on our offices where we have PV at the moment. And it was, at the moment, battery storage, it doesn't necessarily wash its face in terms of the cost of the actual battery and then what your return on that investment is. So I suppose from a procurement point, and that not necessarily sustainability, batteries aren't at the moment quite cost prohibitive in terms of being able to use them. But that's what we're looking at the moment, is whether we look and definitely over the next 3 to 5 years there'll be batteries in place, and they'll be more available as the cost comes down for the batteries, and there's more availability. It will definitely be an option going forwards.
Thanks very much, and I'm going to move on to a couple of questions about kind of data modelling, and actually there's a specific question as well that I'll come to just to make sure we get an answer to it. But Ashley's asking, does anybody have any energy modelling tools that wouldn't mind sharing their experience? So I'll kind of maybe look in the chat box to see whether anybody wants to come in on that one. If I can just prime our presenters, and I'll just have a look out to see whether anybody wants to come in on that. So that's one question about data. Patrick, actually, maybe I'll bring you in, Sam, because Patrick was asking you a specific question. Do you have a direct data agreement with your meter provider? And there are a number of questions about how people are collecting data, how people are measuring. I think some thoughts there. So, Sam, perhaps I'll come to you, and I'll look in the chat box to see whether anybody else wants to come in on that. So, Sam, over to you.
We don't have any data modelling that we use. It has literally been using the information that we've got and then working with an ENCO to forecast that out for the future. But it is part of the plan to better understand the energy use, particularly in our high use buildings. When it comes to the data sharing agreement, again, we've brokered that via an ENCO, and they've been working on our half-hour data and all of the data provision for us.
Thanks very much, and Dan, I'll bring you in if that's okay. So kind of perhaps on any of those specifics, but also just on those general concerns that people are raising. It's clearly an issue about that is of concern. I think looking at the questions to people tuning in today, really how will you go about doing it and making sure it's effective, and that's guiding your decision making moving forward. So I think there's clearly some gaps there that people are worried about. So Dan, I'll just hand over to you.
No problem. I think on the energy modelling side, it's difficult to answer specifically, because there's so many different types of energy modelling. Whether that comes down to things like EPCs or building information modelling from a sort of an architectural and fabric first perspective, or indeed whether that's looking at consumption data from perhaps half-hourly meters or sub-meters to find out exactly where energy consumption is going on a particular site, and indeed then to adjust control strategies or adjust usage or adjust the technology that you're using to try and minimize data. And on that front, that's something that that we help our customers out with on a daily basis, trying to find those opportunities to reduce the number of kilowatt hours that you use. The cheapest kilowatt hour is always the one that you don't use. That's a good phrase. Another good phrase is data drives efficiency. So we've talked about relationships with organisations like meter operators. And what I'd say is it's really important that you have high quality data. Samantha's talked about it a lot, as have others. Getting your energy data into a state where you have a clear and complete set of data so that you can interrogate it to find energy efficiencies, but also to drive effective procurement and to pass on to internal stakeholders, whether that be estates or facilities or general users of those particular properties, to help inform them to change behaviours and to drive efficiency. So yeah, it's really important to have high quality data. Whether that is through a direct agreement or through a supplier-based agreement for your meter operators, again, is an interesting question. Often organisations prefer to have a direct agreement because it gives transparency of cost and transparency of service levels, and it puts you in the driving seat of that arrangement, rather than a supplier-based provision of data, where often suppliers can subcontract that out to subsidiaries of their own businesses, and where it becomes a little bit murky in terms of cost efficiency and indeed service levels. So I'd absolutely recommend a direct relationship, and that's something, again, that we tend to support our clients in.
Thanks very much, Dan, and I'm afraid we are bang out of time. We've had a huge amount of interest in this this webinar today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you to our panelists for some excellent presentations and some really specific answers to those questions as well. And I think there are a number of people who asked about protections for residents as well, and I think we've covered at least in some of those responses how people are going about thinking about that, and that being and having to be absolutely at the forefront of people's minds. So yeah, thank you very much to all of our presenters. Thanks to Unenco for making this webinar possible today, and yeah, absolutely thanks to all of you for tuning in, and hope to see you all very soon. Thank you.